Looking for a new job in manufacturing or steel fabrication? There's an opportunity on the way in East Peoria. Morton Industries expected to open a new facility next month. Here's Angela's Pampa.
For more than 80 years, Morton Industries has called Central Illinois home. Now they're expanding their footprint with this new facility here in East Peoria, a move that leaders say is not just an investment into their business, but into the region's manufacturing future. Located on 2500 North Main Street in East Peoria, the new Morton Industries location will be dedicated to tubular fabrication, but for its new customer base, artificial intelligence and data centers.
The carrier tubes are going to be carrying fluids like hydraulic lines or hydraulic fluids, cooling fluids. And so the market that we're getting into right now is really based around all of the cooling of the chip inside the data center.
Peoria leaders say the growth is exciting and shows that the market in Central Illinois can adapt to new demand.
Is a completely new industry, that Morton Industries is getting into, with a new set of customers and a new set of capabilities that they hadn't really explored before, which makes them a more resilient company and a broader company, and one that'll have a deeper impact here on the region.
Currently, the business focuses on carbon steel, some aluminum, and some stainless steel. Their core business centers around the internal workings of generators and motors. Other local industries who have entered the data center market include Caterpillar and Komatsu, who beside building off-highway construction and mining equipment, make parts for data centers.
The data center industry is a really interesting industry, and while it has obviously some local implications about the siting of data centers, the reality is these data centers are being built all across the globe. And we have a number of companies here that are taking advantage of that, that growth.
The estimated growth of Morton Industries this year alone is by 200 people. Between 50 to 100 of those will be in the new East Peoria location.
Machine operators is really the focus around here, but it's not your normal machine. It's a very highly sophisticated type of welding that some people have welding experience that are running them right now, and some people that we're training from the ground up. So highly skilled, but able to train, trainable people.
In East Peoria, Angela's Pampa, 25 News.